Most of us think we love ourselves in the general sense of the word, but what does it mean to truly love ourselves? For a long time, I thought I loved myself, but as I grew older, I realized that the love I had for myself wasn't as strong as I thought it was. And as I keep living and growing and just evolving, I realized that there's still parts of me that needs work. I still need to develop. And I'm not ashamed to admit that. And if you aren't either, stick around with your girl and let's talk love. So last week on the podcast, we talked about being true to ourselves and what that means when it comes to relationships. And not sticking around when we know it's not going to work, and being true to ourselves, and just not putting on a front when we're dating and all that stuff. Like, we talked about that last week. So if you didn't watch that episode, check it out. Yet, in order to be true to ourselves, like we talked about last week, we first need to love on ourselves. And that's partly why people can't be true to themselves, because they don't have love for themselves. And when I am speaking of love, I'm not talking about in the generic sense of the word. I am talking about a more in-depth meaning of the word, like how we take care of our body. How are we showing up for ourselves? How are we allowing people to treat us? Disappointments we face and how we handle them. That shows the love that we have for each other. Are we gracious with ourselves? Constantly putting others above ourselves. How we forgive ourselves and our past traumas and things that we have gone through. Like, these all make sense in the deeper sense of the word of love and loving yourself. And when I thought about the true definition of love in relationships and how it covers a multitude of sins and faults, like the Bible tells us, like, we're supposed to forgive our partner, not necessarily stay, especially if it's habitual turmoil, but we're supposed to forgive and stay, or either forgive and move on. Whatever your case is, whether you choose to stay or move on, you still need to forgive. And I realize that it works that way for yourself as well. A lot of us dwell on past mistakes and current negativity because we don't have true love for ourselves. We feel as though we aren't worthy of forgiveness, and so it trickles over into our relationships and our intimate relationships and relationships with everyone else as well. Because I'm a firm believer in, if your romantic relationships are working, you probably need to monitor the relationships around you, like what's going on around you and the people that you interact with, because it could be something like your relational skills that is the problem. Like I said last week, you hurt nobody but yourself when you do this. And you hurt your relationship too, I guess, really, in essence, you hurt your relationships as well, because how you treat yourself sets the precedent for how other people will treat you, how people in intimate relationships will treat you. When you are with someone, you have to teach them how to love you, how to communicate with you, how to talk to you, what you don't like, etc. And although, yes, your partner should be studying you, but you are still teaching them through your actions and your behaviors and the words you say. And it's important that we hone in on that. So the thing about loving yourself is, if you don't know how to love you, how can you teach someone else to love you? If you're not in tune with who you are as an individual, how can you teach that to somebody else? And that's why women end up with men that don't appreciate them, because they're not in tune with themselves. An example of, setting the precedent for your relationship, we talked about this last week, in loving yourself and loving your body, right? If you have sex with everybody you meet, eventually you're going to become this sex object to them. You'll eventually start to see yourself as that sex object. You're not going to have value within on yourself. You owe yourself, and I think this is important for people to understand, you owe yourself the love that you are giving away to other people for free. For people that don't appreciate you. For people that won't appreciate you. So I used to think that women are what they attract. I was that person, like, you are what you attract. And, I think it's important for people to understand that as time goes on, as you evolve, your opinions and ideas about situations and things change. You start to evolve as a person, and you start to grow and develop and experience, and suddenly, okay, you have a new outlook. Your standpoint might be the same, but, compassion might be there. Your outlook may be different. So I was one of those people, I thought you are what you attract. But women, I understand, we can attract anything. We have what men desire, and so we can attract that we can attract them to a certain extent. And some men aren't phased by that. They need more to settle down with you and call you a wife and make you a wife. And then there's some men that just take it and treat you like what you're treating yourself. We more so are what we entertain. And how we entertain men is contingent upon how we feel about ourselves, how we love ourselves. Are we showing men, hey, you cannot play with me. You cannot play with this one right here. I'm a masterpiece, okay? Now, again, I just want to throw this disclaimer out there. There is a fine line between all of this, and that's accountability. Something that women tend to lack in this day and age is being accountable for our role. I'm not saying you should walk around like, I love myself, I'm the ish, I'm that girl, and just be rude to other people. No. You can love yourself and still be gracious and kind to another person. And also just not putting men down and thinking that you're just, above them. And I think there's a level of patience and growth that we have to have with our partner. Every couple experiences that in different ways, and this is partly why I tell couples don't give up so easily. Sometimes, yes, you have to let go, you have to leave the situation, but other times we give up so prematurely because we're lazy. We don't want to fight for the relationship, and that's probably because we never truly fought for ourselves. So again, if you don't fight for yourself, you can't fight for this relationship. A relationship cannot work if you don't love yourself, if you don't have that love within, because two things will happen. Either you'll come to the realization that this is not something that you want and then it's not going to work, or you will accept anything and diminish your self-worth, which is still not going to work. Not loving yourself and being in a relationship, to me, is pure self-sabotage. And I say this because not loving yourself doesn't help with building a genuine connection, because when you're trying to build a genuine connection and you don't love yourself, you're building with a version of yourself that doesn't care about themselves. You can't connect to somebody if you can't connect to yourself, if you have no connection within. When you don't have a connection with Christ. And when you don't have a connection with Christ, because you don't have a connection to the Most High, to the person that created all, to the person that knows all, you don't have discernment. Which is another reason why women pick men that don't care about them and that don't value them. You don't have discernment. Now hear me when I say this. Not loving yourself to the fullest extent, that doesn't make you a bad person or necessarily a troubled person, right? Some days I doubt myself to the fullest capacity that one can doubt. You guys have no idea. Just thinking about what I put in my body. I'm not at the healthiest weight that I should be. You may see a roll if you're watching on YouTube, or a video clip on a reel. Like, you see a roll or two. When I don't complete my self-care routine, it was a time where I hadn't done it in 7 days, and I kind of felt it in my skin, like, you're not being attentive to that. And while these are all small things to you guys, these are things that I do to love on me. When I fail at something and I don't handle it how I should handle it, or whatever the case may be, like, I always question, am I showing up for me? Am I doing the right things? Am I putting the right things in my body? Should I, there's a plethora of things. We all go through this. I have 3 words. I was reading a book. It's called High Performing Habits. I think I got this idea out of the book, out of that book. It's called High Performing Habits, and he talks about having 3 words to, put in as an alarm, 3 words that you want to have completed by the end of the day, or something to that extent. And so my 3 words are: have I accomplished something? Was I thoughtful? And did I live today? And to me, it's a good way of self-care and loving on yourself. Like I said earlier, there's some days where I don't show up for myself. I haven't accomplished anything. And then there's days where I can check it off and say, yes, I was thoughtful today. Yes, I did accomplish a task today, whether it's completing a podcast or fixing a meal that I wanted. Yes, I did live. I did things that I enjoy with my husband. There's days where I can't check that off either. But the truth is, some days you don't accomplish things, and that doesn't make you a bad person. And that's why I share this, to say that Just because you struggle with loving yourself doesn't make you less than. It just means you need to be aware and be a work in progress. That's the direction that I'm going with this. It's better to be self-aware and moving towards something than to not. You know, learning to love yourself and a new version of yourself is not something that happens overnight. It's not something that comes with ease. It's something that you put into yourself every single day. It's an ongoing journey, ultimately, because trouble always arises along your journey of life that makes us question ourselves, that makes us question our integrity, our dignity, all the things that makes us love who we are. Things come up and it does challenge you, and it can make you feel less than. But I'm here to tell you that you shouldn't feel less than. This is a part of life. And I think the biggest struggle, and what I'm getting at here, the biggest struggle that I see with people not loving themselves how they should love themselves, the struggle is acceptance. We don't accept. Acceptance is key in understanding every piece of your life was designed for a purpose. So while we're hurt about parental neglect or that tenured relationship that didn't last, it happened not to us, but for us. We just don't accept it. And when you think about something happening to you, you come off victim mentality. Woe is me, life sucks, it's always me. It's just very negative. But when you think about something happening for you, that's when you realize you have triumph, you have victory, you have experience. You can go out and teach somebody else when you realize something happened for you, the benefit for you. I feel victim, and I'm not here to put anybody down because I fell victim to, not understanding this, not realizing my past situations that embarrassed me. I should be using as leverage to love myself and understanding that this was my purpose. I had to go through these things to get to where I am now. And I thought I would never share that Nate and I were like super duper 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 dead broke and living in motels because it was just embarrassing. Now, how we got there is a valid reason. It wasn't like we were being frivolous. It was just something that happened. But acceptance truly helped me love myself in our situation where we came from, and not be ashamed of it. A lot of couples and people are ashamed of their stories, and they are not helping anybody by being ashamed of it. They're not helping anybody by pretending as though life is perfect and nothing has gone wrong in their life. The problem with this is we try to make purpose mean what we think it should mean instead of leaning on God for understanding. Again, the theme of this podcast, if you don't accept yourself or your past, you won't triumph in your relationships because you won't be able to accept theirs. And I keep reiterating that because that's the thing. Your conflict management skills will suffer. You'll pacify negative traits. You have to love yourself. I can tell you to get a self-care routine. I can tell you to set boundaries. I can tell you to learn to say no and all the things that I do for self-love. But truly, acceptance is the key and the first step in loving yourself. It takes digging deep, and it's not an easy thing to accept the past, especially if you have a negative past. It's not an easy thing to accept that this relationship that you thought was going to go the distance did not go the distance. It's hard to accept these things, but you have to dig deep in accepting that you are where you are meant to be. That was in my high school yearbook as my quote, as my senior quote. May you trust God that you are exactly where you meant to be. And until you get to that place, you'll always be looking at stuff happening to you, like I said, and not for you. Once you have acceptance, that is what builds confidence. Remember that loving yourself first starts with gives you confidence, right? And in order to be confident in your relationship, you first have to be confident in yourself. If you're new here, you'll hear me say that a ton of more times. If you're not new here, I always say that. You have to be confident in yourself to be confident in your relationship. And why is confidence important in relationships? And that's because you make up half of the relationship. So if you don't believe you can overcome a battle that you may be facing within, you're not going to overcome the battles that will come in the relationship. Because guess what? Grief is going to happen. Financial situation is going to happen. Or finance issues is going to happen. Problem with the kids is going to happen. Things are going to come up. Job discrepancies, moving. Things are going to come up. And if you don't have that fight within you for your personal situation, you're not going to have that fight within you for somebody else. It's just not going to be there. I think the biggest thing we need to understand, especially when you're dating someone, is to take your time after each relationship and self-evaluate. I was one of those girls in middle school and high school that stayed with a boyfriend. But when you go from relationship to relationship, we all know you take that baggage on with you. You take your partner's problems. You don't know that. You take their problems and their insecurities that you gained from the relationship. Any confidence that you lost, emotional damage, all that you carry on without even healing, which could put a true damper on how you feel about yourself. And I have a podcast coming out later, I think it's the next one actually, about one of my, somebody that I was talking to asked me what was wrong with her. And, you know, we'll talk about that later on. But all of that you take on. And it's like you're the one. Doing that will make you feel unworthy because you haven't taken the time to process the situation, learn and grow and understand what you should be understanding to be better for yourself and then being better in the next relationship going forward. I want to leave you guys with this. If you don't value yourself, you're always going to look for people who don't value you either. So if you're one of those women and even men that find yourself dating men that aren't motivating you or aren't motivated by anything, it's probably because you feel that way about yourself. And projection, it can kind of be flipped around too. You know, you want this person, but you're not that person that you want. So you have to value yourself in order to be able to pick out the people correctly that value themselves. Again, and that starts with having a relationship with Christ first. You have to have that relationship with him first in order to discern. That's the first step for all my Christians out there. But I want to evaluate self-love in the form of these two questions that I want to leave you with. If you're suffering with this, loving yourself, and you feel like you're picking the wrong people or you're picking men or women that you know you should not be given chances to, and that you know in hindsight that you never, if you were in your right space, that you never should have been with them in the first place, how are you currently showing up to love yourself? Think about all the things that I talked about in the beginning. What are you putting into your body? You know, what are you doing? What are your daily activities like? Do you have personal goals that you're working towards? How are you showing up for yourself? And the second question is, what adverse thoughts am I holding on to? What negativity are you holding on to? Again, people can't answer these questions because it takes, that's why a lot of people don't like to go to therapy, because it takes digging deep and figuring out, why am I this way? When really, ultimately, a lot of us know what caused us, what negative thoughts we're holding on to. It's just hard to say out loud because maybe it can present tears. Maybe it can present a conversation that we need to have with a loved one. Maybe it can make us not like somebody that, you know, like a parental figure or whatever the case may be. We have to take these adverse thoughts that we're having within ourselves and really dig deep into that. That's how you love yourself, and that's how you ultimately end up being true to yourself and get to a better you. Get to loving you more. Alright guys, I'm Angie Roll, the teen wife that turned my struggles into strength, marital woes into wins, and made the mistakes so you don't have to. I'll see you next week as we talk about the toxicity of relationship goals.